by graduate students. There were a couple of us undergraduates who kind of started it, and then we had a local entrepreneur from the local community in Salt Lake City who was sort of running this program. And what we found was that there were lots of professors on campus who were developing technologies, were interested in starting companies, and had no idea how. And the university wasn't really equipped to help them because all the university wanted to do was generate some revenue from that. And so this program was started as a service to inventors to help them start their own businesses. So we'd write business plans, we'd write marketing plans, we'd do patent searches. At the end, we'd give them a big packet that was sort of, what they could use to now go try to raise money. So I did that for 2 years, and I really enjoyed it. I worked on biotech, I worked on genetic technologies, energy, computer science, and I really felt at that time that I was kind of playing cheerleader. I was standing on the sidelines, I'd look at these interesting technologies, and at the end of the day, all I would do is I'd tell them what they should do, and then we'd move on to the next one. So this sort of motivated me to go back, get a little more of a technical degree. I wanted to do startup companies, so where better to go do startup companies in technology than Silicon Valley? So I was lucky to get accepted, went and got a master's degree at Stanford. Incidentally, this program, the Lassonde Center, since we started it, and that was 10 years ago we started it, they spun out over 15 companies, startups that have all stayed in Salt Lake City. The dean of the business school at the University of Utah at the time has now been made sort of the technology czar of all the state of Utah, and he's trying to bring in more technology. So it was a big deal for the state of Utah what we did, and it gave me kind of a taste for doing this. So when I went to Stanford, my original intent was to do renewable energy. I had always wanted to do renewable energy. My dad spent 30 years building windmills and hydro plants and geothermal. He never built solar. And it was always something I wanted to do. But when I was at Stanford, the hot thing in Silicon Valley was medical device startups. Everybody was starting medical device companies. And so I quickly sort of saw that this was going to be my opportunity in graduate school. So I started taking courses in medical device design. I took a few courses at the medical school with the med students to try to understand physiology. And at the end of it, as my master's program was wearing down, I had originally enrolled as a PhD student, but I was sort of on the fence and thinking I wasn't going to get a PhD. I was working with a team of people who had invented a device for treating brain aneurysms. And we were actually very interested in commercializing that. We won a national business plan competition. We were pushing forward with this. And at the last minute, a company who we would have been competing with came in and said, your patent, Stanford was giving a patent for us based on our technology, and said, your patent is so close to what we're doing, we're gonna file a lawsuit if you file this patent. Our patent attorneys had a different opinion, but at the end of the day, we didn't really want to mess with a giant company. So I started doing some work for some other surgeons. I was designing devices for them, and they wanted to build companies. And one of the guys I did some work for said, hey Pete, I'm going to leave my practice at Stanford. I'm going to start up this company. I want you to come as the first engineer. So I left, and left with a master's degree. The speaker at my commencement was Steve Jobs. Talked to us about his experience in entrepreneurship. I was really excited about this. About the same time I got married, and my life was on a great track. Started this company, Alice Medical. I was the first engineer there. I walked in the door and it was an empty room. Starting this company as an engineer means that I went to the hardware store and I bought a screwdriver. I bought a vacuum cleaner. And I did everything. When you do a startup company, you have to realize there are no white collar and blue collar workers. There's no class system in a startup company. Everybody does everything. And I loved it. I brought in machines, I set things up, I did IT support for the CEO to figure out how to make the PowerPoints work. I did everything, and I loved it. This company was based on a technology using ultraviolet light in the nose to suppress the immune system's response to allergies. And who has allergies? Do people have allergies here in Hawaii? You get hay fever? It seems like they're too much of a season, but yeah, some people probably do. Well, there's a class of people who have such bad allergies that they can't breathe. It's to the point that when allergy season comes along, they stay home from work for 2 weeks. And for a lot of these people, most of the drugs don't work. And so that was really the target patient group for us. And we were trying to use low-dose UV light in the nose. And we designed this system. We did a lot of tests. You're actually privileged to be looking at the world's foremost expert in the transmission of ultraviolet light through mucus. There's nobody in the world who knows more about it than me. That doesn't really give me any ability to make any money or provide any value, but it's true. I am the recognized expert. About the time I realized I was the recognized expert in mucus transmission of UV light, I started to realize this was not my passion, and I didn't want to continue down this road. So I had spent probably 5 hours a day for the last 2 months with a device up my own nose or somebody else's nose, trying to figure out how to make it more comfortable. And I was hearing my nephews and my friends tell jokes about how I had stuff up my nose all day at work. That's what I did for a living. And I said, I got to get out of this field. This is gross. I was looking through a catalog at frozen cadaver heads that I was supposed to be doing testing on this with this medical device. What am I doing here? I need to get back to renewable energy. But I started sort of casting my resume around, wanting to join other startups. And there was a company starting up that needed somebody with my skill set doing a robotic colonoscope. Now, I don't know who knows about colonoscopes. Colonoscope is basically the only thing worse than something that goes in your nose as far as a medical device. So at this point I said, that's it. I'm getting out of medical device. I'm getting back into energy. So now here I am. I've started a company. I had all this experience at Stanford doing medical device design. And I'm trying to get into renewable energy. And about this time, the solar boom started happening. I saw this and I said, how am I going to do this? Well, it turned out that I had been developing an expertise in ultraviolet light optics, non-imaging optics, a lot of things dealing with optics, which is the same thing that solar power is. It's focusing light and redirecting light. And so I was able to sort of make a pitch. I kind of wrote down a bunch of bullet points where I said, here are the skills I can transfer directly over from my current job into this completely different industry. And I kind of put a pitch together, and then what I started doing, I started looking down lists of alumni at the University of Utah, at Stanford, who's applied for a job by sending a resume in on to a place. Anybody ever done that? Did it go well? Did you get the job?
No.
No. Did you get a call back?
No.
Okay. Who's familiar with the term networking? What does it mean to network?
To make connections.
Make connections, right? That's the way you find good jobs. That's how you find jobs. That's how you transfer over. You let somebody talk to you, see you, tell that you're sharp, and then you ask them for a job. And that's really what I was doing. There were lots of companies with online resumes, asking for online resumes. So I found a guy. His name was Rob Morgan, and he had been an energy developer for 20 years. And I said, hey, can I buy you lunch? I'm a Stanford student. I want to talk to you and pick your brain about how I can get into the renewable energy business. And he said, yeah. So I said, you pick the place. So that's another thing. If you're going to network with somebody and you're going to go meet some old alumni, buy them lunch. Do something that shows that you recognize the value they're providing. Don't just ask them to kind of hold your hand and take you home. Provide some value. Buy them lunch. Tell them something they didn't know. So we went to lunch. We talked about things, and he ends up telling me that he's about to start a solar company based on an Australian technology, and they're looking for engineers. So I give him my resume, and I said, well, I'd be very interested. I got a call back 2 months later from the CEO of the company, who was a crazy person. He was basically Al Gore's little helper. Didn't really know much about running businesses, but could scare the pants off of people about global warming. And I think that's how he raised most of his money. So I had this meeting with him in a coffee shop. He didn't ask me any questions. Didn't ask me, do you know how to be an engineer? What are your skills? He basically just told me about global warming for 2 hours, asked me if I agreed, and if I was interested in combating it. I said yes, and I got the job. And so that's how I got into solar energy. So I was the very first engineer hired at the U.S. company that had purchased an Australian technology. And the first thing I did was I got sent down to Australia to a town that is just a complete hole. You know, it's a coal mining town. The company had built a small solar plant right next to the coal mining town, a giant coal power station that was feeding steam. And I want to just take some time out to explain to you what our technology is. And so this is solar thermal power. Most people are familiar with solar electric power, otherwise known as photovoltaics. You know, you see these panels up on the roof. Those are making direct electricity, right? And those go right down into your wall outlet. They go through an inverter, converts DC power to AC power, and then you can plug in something. You can run your hair dryer on your solar panel. Well, that's one way to make solar power. The interesting thing about the sun, right, is the sun is the source of heat for the whole world. And so you can actually harvest the sun's power, not just by solar electric, but by solar thermal. In Hawaii, there are tons and tons of solar thermal heaters on roofs. Anybody have those on their roof? Yeah, you guys have them. They're all over the island. You see these things up on people's roofs. A lot of them are not solar panels. It's actually solar water heaters. People collect heat in black pipes, and then when they take a hot shower, that's where the hot water is coming from. So we do that, but in a much, much grander scale. So this is our system. This is what we built. We built a solar steam generator here. And we essentially take cold water, we run it up into an elevated system, and it runs across, and we focus mirrors onto this system. And so this cold water comes up, and relatively cold. The water's about 300 degrees Fahrenheit, high pressure. And it comes out at about 900 degrees Fahrenheit, superheated steam. So most of you have boiled potatoes or boiled vegetables, and you see the steam coming off of your food. Well, if you can see it, it means it's not superheated. It means there's water vapor. What we have coming out of here is a hot gas. It feels like hot air. I mean, there is no moisture left in it. You run that through a steam turbine, the same way you would run steam out of a gas-fired or coal-fired boiler. It turns that turbine, and that turbine is connected to a generator, which then sends electrons onto the grid. So this is our core product. We don't make steam turbines. We don't make generators. We leave those to GE and Siemens and all the big companies. So this is what we do. Go to the next one. I'll show you a photo. So this is a photo of one of the systems we've built. So you can see all of these mirrors here are all at slightly different angles because the sun's up here in the sky. The sun bounces off of these mirrors and focuses onto this linear receiver. So you see that white line up there. That's actually reflected light off of tubes that absorb 95% of the heat that hits it. So what you're seeing is a very, very small fraction of the energy that's hitting those tubes. We put about 60 times the intensity of the sun on those tubes, and if we didn't have water flowing through, we would melt the steel, and it would be dripping out of it. That's how much energy is going up into that. There's actually a funny story. There's a competitor of ours called Sterling Energy Systems. That they have a big dish that aims at a heat engine, and they were doing a big demonstration for some politicians, and their aiming was slightly off, and instead of hitting the engine, they were hitting the side of it, and they melted the side of this aluminum engine, and they literally had dripping aluminum falling down to the ground. I mean, it was one of the biggest disasters in our industry, but there's so much energy from the sun focusing here. When we built our first one of these, everything broke because we underestimated how much heat and how much power was going to be up there. Everything was bending and melting and getting soft, and so we had to redesign it and make it much stronger. So next slide. So this is the first system that was ever built. This is in Australia. It's near a town called Singleton. It's about an hour inland and 2 hours north of Sydney in a coal mining town. So I got sent here for 5 weeks to go work on the system. And what they had was a system where nothing fit together right, nothing turned, nothing was working, and they didn't know how to test it. All they had were a bunch of construction workers who put it together during months ago. So my job was to come in and figure out how to actually test this system and get performance numbers out of it. Amazingly, the venture capitalists who put $45 million into the company that formed by them didn't actually have any test data. That's how crazy people were to try to get into solar power. Everybody wanted to be in solar power. So they were in such a rush, they didn't have performance numbers. They sort of made this bet, and then I went down to get the performance numbers. The performance numbers came out, so what we did is we see this lake up here. I had to go to an agricultural supply store and buy a pump. I bought a float. I floated this pump out far enough into the lake that I could put a valve down and suck lake water. So I pumped lake water into the far end, floated through as fast as we could pump it so that it wasn't boiling, and then we looked at how much temperature rise we had from this end to this end, and that's how we figured out how much heat we were putting into the system. So we had giant fire hoses just strung all over the place, and at the end we were just dumping hot water back into this swamp. Luckily, this lake also has hot water being dumped into it from the coal station, so it wasn't really going to do anything to it. The water was about 85, 90 degrees from the coal station. But test data came out, and it wasn't that good. So the system worked pretty well. The technology seemed like it made sense, but there were problems. And some of the problems were that the mirror shape wasn't good. The mirrors weren't focusing quite right. They were losing lots of energy. The pipe coating had some issues that needed to be fixed. So we bought this and we started trying to create business in the US and other places. But it became apparent that we weren't going to be able to sell a lot of systems based on the performance from this system, because it was a first of its kind. It was bootstrapped. It was built with money from friends and family and all sorts of things. So the company raises $45 million. The next thing we do is we get ready to build a plant in the US to demonstrate the technology. So we're in a big hurry. There were 2 engineers working on this. There was myself and the first guy that I hired, named Alex Herman, and we designed and essentially negotiated the prices on, got manufacturers, helped them to build every component, every nut and bolt of the whole system. So when I was designing this, somebody could ask me the dimension of anything, and I basically had it in my head. I'm no longer like this. I have a team of people who do that for me. But there are 2 engineers who designed this entire system, and we built this over the space of 5 to 6 months in Bakersfield, California, about 4 hours south of where I live. I drove back and forth once or twice a week. I probably paid for my car once over in mileage reimbursements, driving back and forth. And we built it. Now this is a funny picture. So after we built it in October of 2008, we commissioned it. And when you build a power plant, the term commissioning means you get it all set up, you get it running, and you kind of get all the bugs worked out, and now it's starting to do what it's supposed to do. So we commissioned this in 2008, and then we had a big party, and Arnold himself came down and sort of gave a speech. He called this photovoltaic power. He was very proud to be speaking at the positive photovoltaic power production. That was not what it was. You can see, so here's Arnold, and here's our CEO. He's a large man, and his head is just huge. I mean, literally, it's about this size in real life. He's just a monstrous guy. Really, really nice guy. We actually got a chance to talk to him, and he flew down in his helicopter, got out, spoke at this thing, got back in his helicopter, and flew away. One of the more fun things we did. So this pilot plant was built in Bakersfield. At this time, we had reasonable numbers. People saw it. We were starting to draw up some interest. So here's the question. If you're a venture-backed company, we had raised $45 million, and then we needed some more money to build things. We raised another, $20 million. But usually you don't want to get all that money at one time, because what happens is you give away all your equity for that money. So as a company, we wanted to keep roughly $10 million in the bank so we could keep paying out our paychecks and paying our vendors for supply material. So now you're trying to sign a contract with somebody, and you're trying to say, we're going to build you a $100 million system. Our company can't build small systems. It doesn't make sense to do what we do unless it's big. So if you're going to build a $100 million system, and somebody says, well, what's the warranty on that? And we say, oh, it's a 5-year warranty. And then they look at what I have in the bank, and they see there's $10 million in the bank. So let me ask you, if you went and bought a car from somebody, let's say it was a used car, but it was a nice one. It was like $50,000 used BMW. And you bought it from a private party, and you could tell the guy had no money. Right? He's selling this, it's a fire sale, he doesn't have anything left, and he says, hey, you got nothing to worry about, I'll warranty this for 5 years. Is that warranty really worth anything? No, it's not worth anything, right? how can you warranty a $100 million plant if you only have $10 million in the bank? You can't. So what we'd have to do is we'd have to go to a bank and say, hey, will you back our warranty on this? And the bank said, sure, we'll back your warranty. It's the first time anybody's ever built this. We want a giant chunk of money for backing your warranty up front. And yeah, we'd be happy to back your warranty. What happens is, at that point, you can't sell this because you gotta pay the banks to back your warranty, you gotta pay these other people to do this, and the product price is so high. So after we had these built, we had it demonstrated. The next step is we had to find a partner who could back us up and essentially provide the capital necessary for us to land projects. So we started at this point shopping the technology around, trying to find partners. And we talked to multiple heavy industry players, Doosan, a giant Korean heavy industry company, Alstom, Areva, the largest nuclear company in the world. And we found some interest with Areva. So Areva is about a 60,000 employee nuclear power company. They're headquartered in Paris, France, and they were very interested in getting a solar and a wind and a biomass and other renewable technologies. So they came to us and they said, well, we're interested in buying your company, and we kind of negotiated. We got some other companies. At the time, our company didn't have a lot of money left, so it was important for us. We wanted to sell the company as soon as we could. Areva knows that because anytime a company's going to buy you, they get full access to your finances. So if it looks like you're running out of money, I mean, if you're going to buy somebody and they're running out of money, you're going to bid low for them, right? So the only way you can really do okay in this transaction is you have to get other people to the table who are interested. So we were working really, really hard to get other people to the table so that we could get a bidding off each other, and we did to a certain degree. But ultimately what happened was Areva wanted to buy us for a certain price. The venture capitalists who owned us at this time said, no, that's too low. And they said, well, what else are you going to do? And they said, we'll just let the company go under. They said, that's crazy. And it was basically like, somebody trying to, sell a puppy and saying, if you don't buy this puppy, I'm gonna kill him. I mean, that's what happens. And these venture capitalists are cutthroat. They're cutthroat. They say, it's important for me to maintain my reputation as a cutthroat venture capitalist. And I'm not going to give you this company for a bargain. I'll just let the company go under. I'll let all the jobs go away. And that's the industry. So there was a lot of sort of intense negotiation going on. Finally, we came down to two options where they said, okay, we'll pay you $200 million. And the venture capitalist said, no, that's not enough. We said, no, that's not enough. And they said, okay, you can have the company for $175 million, but if we hit some performance targets, you'll kick in another $75 million. And it was a big deal here because the venture capitalists at this point needed to make a bet on us, the technical team, of whether we could hit these performance targets. So overall, a total of about $120 million was invested in the company. And so they're looking at either a 70% return or a 110%. And that makes a big difference to their bottom line. The venture capitalist essentially makes money by investing in 10 companies, knowing that 9 are going to go out of business, and that one of them might make it. And so the bigger return they can make for that company that makes it, that keeps them afloat. If they get a small return for that company, it doesn't cover all the companies that went under. So we had to make a bet. And everybody got together, all of our venture capitalists, people on the board, our new CEO is talking to the engineering team, talking to us. And at this point, I'm running the engineering team. I've got engineers and we're looking at the performance numbers that we're negotiating in the contract. He said, can you guys hit these numbers? And we said, yeah, we think we can. We sandbagged a little bit. We put in a little bit of fat there so that we could get it. Afterwards, we all sort of took a straw poll, a silent straw poll, of how far above those numbers we thought we'd be. And it was interesting. Some people thought we'd be below. Some people thought we'd be above. Overall, I think the average was everybody thought we'd be about 5% above what the necessary performance numbers were to get this $75 million. And the interesting thing is, for all the guys like me who were in early and founded this company, all of our equity, all of our upside was in this last $75 million. So it was highly, highly motivating. Unfortunately, I did not make $75 million. Very small portion of that money. But it was highly motivating to us. So at the end, we said, yes, we can do it. And we committed to build one more steam generator at this pilot facility in Bakersfield. And that's the picture. I'll go back to that. That's the picture of this. So it's a little bit different than this. Better technology. We solved some of the problems we had. We changed the technology up front. Up at the top. We basically came up with a piping design that enabled us to have a bunch of thermal inertia, thermal energy that's stored in this system, so we can keep producing superheated steam even after the sun's down. So we keep making steam for about half an hour as we extract energy back out of the metal. So we did a bunch of these things. We built this technology, and we beat our performance targets by about 12 to 13%. And everybody was happy. Everybody got their money. Our investors did very well with it. And at this point, we were bought by the deal was completed. They bought us for $250 million. Now they own our company. We're now called Riva Solar. Just a couple of numbers. We now have about 200 people. So when I hired on, it was 7 people. Some of the people have left. I'm now the number 2 seniority person in this company, which doesn't amount for a whole lot, except that I know where all the bodies are buried and I know all the secrets. So before, where we had these small plants, so what you're looking at in Bakersfield was about a 5 megawatt electric plant, and the one in Australia was a 1 megawatt. We have 295 megawatts electrical under contract. So just to give you an understanding of a megawatt of energy is, depending on where you live, if you live in California, a megawatt of energy will supply power for about 1,000 households. If you live in a place that has slightly higher energy consumption, it might be 500 households. In India, a megawatt of electricity will cover 2,000 households. So 295 megawatts for where we are building will provide clean power for more than 1 million people. And you know, in a sense, for me, that's really the big motivation at this point. I don't have equity in Riva anymore. It's a giant company. So they pay me a salary, but my big motivation is the same reason why I got into it, which is the fact that we're going to be providing clean power to people who've never had access to electricity before and making money doing it for our parent company, if everything goes well. We're building a large 125 megawatt electrical plant out in Rajasthan, the westernmost state of India, out on the Pakistan border. And it'll be supplying electricity to 4 rural farmers to run irrigation pumps to farm fields that have always been dry farmed. You know, how many people have been to India before? I mean, India is just a staggering place to go. It's a place where people, they cannot make enough food to supply their population. So anything you can do to make food and to be able to produce things that are going to lead to high quality life in India is just a huge impact socially. I mean, at this point for me, this is almost like social entrepreneurship. Impact what we're doing. There you go, huh?
I'm awake.
So it's neat. You know, we go out to this site out in India, and there's camels walking around, and there's guys in turbans walking around, and there's nomads who move through. We have to sometimes chase the nomads off of the construction site because they don't have shoes or hard hats on, and that's a rule now. I mean, it's just a different world when we go down there. So our company is active in the U.S., in Australia, India, the Middle East, South Africa, Southern Europe. And we're as busy as we could be. There are challenges. Whenever your company gets bought in a merger, you're a merger guy, right? Yeah. Mergers are tough because you blend 2 very different cultures, and there are always challenges with that. And you know, we're kind of overcoming those as a company. And there are definitely things where I miss being a small startup company, but if we weren't ever going to be able to build our power plants that we had. So I wanted to just sort of close up by, next one, by talking about just some lessons I've learned in this process. by no means am I up here telling you guys how to do it, or saying I figured anything out. But I can share some things I learned. You're probably all here for one reason or another because you're interested in being an entrepreneur and starting companies. There's a lot of different ways to do it. You could be a technology startup company where you've got a bunch of graduate degree engineers come together trying to produce patents. You can start a dollar store called Eva. There are a lot of ways you can start a business. I think the key things for starting a business, you have to be a doer. I know that your courses are all about how do you create a business plan. How do you create a plan? How do you do this? Ultimately, if you want to start a business, you have to take a risk and you have to do some stuff. You're never really going to know if there's a market for the business you're going to start until you start. You're going to have a pretty good idea by doing your market research, but you're going to know a lot better 1 year into having started a business what the market is and what the market wants in a way that you're not going to know until you do it. So the first bullet point is that doers are rewarded. Just stop talking and start doing. Give it a try. If you're capital constrained, if you don't have much money, figure out a business that doesn't need a lot of capital to start up, an internet business or something like that. But just give it a try. I think that in entrepreneurship, people who are doers are the ones who are rewarded. The next one is know your own hourly rate. So in the same breath that I say doers are rewarded, don't do stuff that you can get other people to do for you who are better at it than you and can do it with less pain and agony than you can. I'll give you an example. At my company, now, because it's a large company, some things are not run very efficiently. There was a guy in India who said, I need all these drawings, all these engineering drawings on paper. And it's really hard to go find somebody in West Rajasthan who has a large printer for printing a large engineering drawing. And that's fair enough. So rather than just sending all these files off to a printing shop who does this professionally, somebody in my company hired a contractor to go print out every drawing on a really fast printer, roll them up, put them in tubes, and then ship them to India. And I finally went to this woman and I said, what on earth are you doing? You hired a contractor. They've been printing this out for 3 weeks. They've had to refill the printer ink 5 times. And all you need to do is send this off to a print shop. They'll do this in an hour for you for $300. Oh, really? I said, yeah. So it's really important to know your hourly rate. Do not spend your time doing things that don't add value. If you need to fly somewhere as an entrepreneur, you need to drive somewhere. Think about how much time it's going to take you to do that. Figure out how much that's costing you. Even though you're not paying yourself a salary because it's your own business, figure out how much your time's worth and outsource if you need to. Find somebody else to do some of the things. Know your market, know your risks. The biggest thing you need to do to start a company is know who's going to buy your product. Who's going to buy it and what do they want? Are they going to buy it because it's cool? Are they going to buy it because it's cheap? Are they going to buy it because it solves a problem? You need to know that. You need to put yourself in their shoes. And your risks. When you start a company, identify your top 3 risks. What are the risks that could doom this company? And those are the things you should think about all the time. How do I deal with those risks? Last one, manage your costs, build the right team. Don't try to do everything the first 2 months. Don't try to set up your giant accounting system when you don't have any revenue coming in. Don't worry about it. Set up your accounting system after you started selling products. Don't set up a big office first thing you start. Work out of your home, work out of your garage until you have some things coming in, then start setting it up. Everything can be built in time. One of the biggest mistakes they made in our company was to get ready to be purchased by a big company. They implemented this giant system called SAP that is it's terrible for a small company that's trying to get things done quickly. And it very quickly slows you down and makes you operate like a big company. And they did it in anticipation of getting bought by a large company. But when a large company buys you, they switch you onto their system anyway. So we, as a startup company, where money is very important, we're always running out of cash, spent $2 or $3 million implementing this software system that provided no use for us. And so one of the things I tell everybody I talk to, I have a lot of friends who are starting companies where I work, and I say, just keep things simple, ramp up as you need to. Don't throw all this cost out front and set stuff up too early. Build the right team. If you're a small company, you don't need to hire a giant sales team until your product's ready. You don't need to hire a CEO until you're ready to start raising money and doing real business. Don't hire too fast. Don't build a big team too fast. Trust yourself. Work on it and build your team up slowly the way you need it. I essentially wouldn't hire somebody until you say, I need somebody who can do this and this and this. Then I hire. Don't build a team first where there are a bunch of people who don't have anything to do. So the last thing I wanted to hit, and I had this conversation with Sister Johnson, was how to get into a startup company. A lot of people are interested in starting their own company. I think that you're probably going to be best off starting your own company if you've worked for another company that was a startup company. You've sort of seen it, and you can kind of take notes. You can do your own startup journal. Here's what was done that was good. Here's what the CEO did that was a bad idea. I'm not going to do this. But I definitely think joining another startup company as employee number 2 or employee number 5, and sort of going through that once, will make you much better at starting a company. So how do you market yourself to start a company? At this point, I hire a lot of people right out of school to work on the teams that I manage. And what I look for are people who are excellent in one depth. If I'm looking for somebody who's incredible at analysis of a certain type of engineering problem, that's what I want. I don't necessarily seek out people who are generalists, because usually if you're good at your specific job, you'll become a generalist through working. So I would say, when you're in college, build a skill. Build a very marketable skill that can be unique for you. Stand out on your resume. This is what I did. I did it in these 5 ways. I'm incredibly good at financial projections. This is what I do. Everything else will come along. I think when you're in college, trying to just become a generalist when you're 21 years old or 22 years old, you'll be a generalist in time by working. I think you definitely want to build a marketable skill, be it accounting, be it finance, engineering, something technical. I think that's a really, really big key. And then, there's a lot of startup companies that are always looking for people. The best way, if anybody is interested in working in startup companies, you guys. So the best way to find a startup company, like a venture-backed startup company, there's a ton of them in the Bay Area where I live. There's venture companies all over the West Coast. I'm sure there's some in Hawaii. Go to the venture funds websites. There are probably some venture funds active in Hawaii, and look at their portfolio companies. Find companies that are doing things that you think are interesting. That's the best way to sort of see what companies, because it's hard to find them online. But that's a great way to find it. And then the best way to get that job is to network. So find some way through some uncle of yours whose cousin knows this guy's grandma to go to lunch with somebody, buy them lunch, and talk to them. Do it under the guise of getting advice, and then ask for a job in a subtle way. It's one of the key things. If you want a job, network. You're not going to get a job by sending resumes in. I hope you guys enjoyed it. If anybody has any questions, this is Brother Christensen when he was younger.
I only wore Hawaiian shirts.
Well, can we give a hand? We've got about 7 minutes or so for question and answers.
Yeah.
So
So whenever you were doing these startups, were you initially taking like were you in a no salary sort of position with them?
I was never in a no salary position, thankfully. And that's a hard position to be in when you've got a wife and young kids. So I was with the medical device company. I was the first guy hired after they had secured funding, and with the solar company, I was the first guy hired after they secured funding. So I came in a great place. The downside to that is you have less equity, right? You have less upside. So for those who don't know, when you talk about equity in a company, if you start a company, let's say 3 guys start a company and they say, okay, we each own this company in thirds. That means, Mr. Jones has 33% equity in the company. Okay, so if that company sells for $100 million and you didn't bring any extra money, that guy just made $33 million. After he gives the government $15 million and the church a little bit, and he's got his own little nest egg. So you get the most equity if you're a family, right? You are in free money. If you're in sort of the next round, you get less equity. Equity is usually you can basically draw a line between equity and risk. If you're taking more risk by joining a company that has a very uncertain future, you'll get more equity. As a company grows and has 150 people and is selling products, not a lot of equity left because you're not taking much risk. The company already has it.
How have you managed the work-life balance of a startup with your goals as a father and a member of the church?
That's a good question. One of the things that I got some really good advice from a guy who was the bishop of the single ward out of the Stanford ward, who started up a very successful medical device company. He said, you're going to be a hard worker, a dynamic person, and people are going to see they're going to get a lot of work out of you. The key is establish very early on what your limits are. Go into work at 8 and leave at 5:30. Don't go into work the first month eager to impress everybody and work till 9 at night every night, because then you've established a precedent. Then when you start scaling back, when you realize, I can't, this is not sustainable, now people are saying, this person's slacking off. Go in, I work a reasonable day, but I worked hard. I didn't do water cooler talk. I do that, and I just established a reputation as a guy who got a lot done, didn't necessarily spend a lot of time in the office. So I've been pretty blessed. I haven't had to spend crazy time. There's always exceptions, right? There's a 2-week period where you're working nights and weekends to get it done. For the most. Oh yeah. I've been the young men's president in my work for 4 years. So my church stuff keeps me pretty busy, and my kids don't keep me busy at all. They're perfect. Yeah, I think the key is just establishing your reputation as somebody who gets it done, that doesn't just spend all night in the office. I've been blessed that the people I've worked with have also been, they've seen the importance of work-life balance. I haven't ever had a boss who was sort of one of those people who wanted to see you punching the time card instead of playing that time.
You use the word add value, and I always listen to this word people from Stanford. I don't know why.
People from Stanford say add value.
Add value.
It's like a buzzword for Silicon Valley, I guess.
Can you give some examples? I mean, I can't understand what you're talking about. I think it's like to see in action. In my current life, how can I add value, things like that.
So, okay, I'll give you an example.
Repeat the question so they can hear it. They're filming.
So Alfredo asked, what does it mean to add value to a company? Yeah, that's a good question. Thanks for calling me out on that. I don't want to just use buzzwords. I think adding value, so let me give you an example. Say I hired an engineer, and I hired them because they were the best person in their class. In the solar business, we can kind of pick who we hire. A lot of people want to be in it. So I hire some hotshot engineer, and I have a design meeting where we're trying to come up with a new design, and he sits there quietly because he's young and doesn't say anything. That guy's not adding value. he's not bringing everything he has to the company. Right? The reason I hired him is because I expect him to add value to the conversation and not just take notes. Right? So I think, I think adding value is really basically contributing beyond just sort of doing the role that's on paper for the contract that you sign. You're actively seeking ways to improve the company. So in a class, add value to a class is basically make good comments that further the discussion. It's not just take notes. Be an active participant in education of yourself and others. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, that's my question. I have a second.
All right.
Now that you are working now, how do you see the future for you? Have you seen yourself setting up a company in this field?
Yeah, it's a good question. I've actually talked a lot about that with my folks. I am not a big company person, right? I'm working now for a 60,000 person company that has a lot of programs, a lot of red tape. It's frustrating for me. I'm very excited and eager about to see the plans and the products that I've designed get implemented in a way that they help other people. But I'm not that excited about working for even for the next 5 to 10 years. So I'm actively seeking out opportunities with some partners to start up companies. This time, the decision that we've made is that this time we're going to start the company and raise money. I was able to make enough money with this last deal that I can now become a founder. I can go off salary for a little bit and raise some money. So that's actually my plan. That might happen in a year, it might happen in a few years. But my plan is starting a company. Actually not planning on trying to do another startup company in solar. But the solar industry is pretty saturated now. There was a giant rush to get into it. A lot of technology sort of came, and the winners were picked and the losers were identified. And now it's kind of a saturated market. The Chinese are making solar panels for cheaper than everyone else. There's not a lot of opportunity left. The opportunity in solar is basically people who are doing loans to people to install on rooftops. It's not in the technology. So we're actively looking at opportunities to capitalize on the fact that there's an immense opportunity in the United States of fuel arbitrage, where they've been finding natural gas in incredible amounts in the continental United States, and there are a lot of areas where people are still using oil where you can use natural gas and it costs 7 times less. And so there's this mismatch. And so that's what I'm actually very interested in. It's still a clean tech, because if I can get away from burning dirty oil and buying oil from the Middle East, then I can get into domestically produced clean fuel and displacing will have a large impact. So that's an area that I'm very interested in.
One more question.
So as far as school goes, you studied physics and then ended up doing mechanical engineering, right?
Yeah.
So, but as far as business goes, you didn't really study that at all in school, but you sound really educated in it. Are you saying I'm just asking, does that just come with experience, with working with different companies, or are you just lucky?
There's a difference between sounding educated and being educated. There's so many things that just require work experience to learn about. And a business degree will get you a few steps forward in that, but 5 years working for a company, you'll know more about business than you if you majored in Hawaiian studies and then you spent 5 years working for a company and in expanding roles where you were pushing yourself and learning things, you'll probably know more about business than you would if you did 4 years of business. And I think that's just because on the job learning, where you're doing 8 hours a day and it's your focus. I think you learn a lot faster. But at the same point, a business degree is very valuable, particularly if you want to build up a skill to do some business. So I had no formal business. I took a couple of courses from the Stanford Business School when I was in graduate school, just getting conversational and finance and accounting.
Thanks, Pete.